Hi, I'm Laura Swain from Lexington Zero Waste Collaborative, or as we call it, Lex Zero Waste. Lex Zero Waste was founded in 2020, and we're a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness and taking action to address the impacts of our consumption choices. So far, we've had some real impacts here in Lexington. Lex Zero Waste drafted a zero waste resolution that passed town meeting in 2020 that then resulted in the town adopting a zero waste plan last fall in 2023. We also started a program we call Lex Sort, which is community drop-off locations for food waste. And we encouraged the town last year to have curbside composting for 2,000 households. And that program is expanding to another 2,000 households this year, if you haven't signed up for that yet. And our last program that's had a big impact is a program we call Zero to Go. And that is a program for stainless steel reusable takeout containers at restaurants. Right now, we are partnered with Royal India Bistro, and we hope to include other restaurants in Lexington. 3 weeks from tonight, we have another program at the community center on May 21st. We'll be showing the movie We Are All Plastic People Now with our partner Oceana. And you can receive more information about that event if you sign up for our newsletter. This discussion with Eve Schuab and her book Year of No Garbage kicks off a year of zero waste events. Tonight, Eve has prepared a presentation about her experience. After her presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes for question and answers. And then we've invited Maggie Peard, Lexington's Sustainability Director, and Erica Bouchard-Rabins, owner of Center Goods here in Lexington Center, to talk about ways to reduce our reliance on plastic products. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Helen Liu from Cary Memorial Library, who will introduce Eve Schuab to us all. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you'll be motivated to reduce the plastics in your household after Eve's presentation.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm actually going to use this microphone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. I'd also like to thank Lex Zero Waste for co-sponsoring this event, and the Lexington Sustainability and Resilience Office and Center Goods for partnering with us on this event. Copies of the author's book will be available for purchase through Maxima Books in the back of the room. I suggest you read it. It was wonderful. Eve will be happy to sign books at the end of the program. And LexMedia is here to record the event. So in the event that you have someone who wanted to join us today and missed it, you can wait for our recap and we'll send a link to the recording. Now, I'm so excited to introduce our guest this evening. Eve Schuab is an internationally published author and humorist, the author of Year of No Sugar, which was released in 2014, and Year of No Clutter, 2017. Her third family memoir is Year of No Garbage, 2023, which she is here to talk about tonight. She has been featured in The New Yorker, on the Dr. Oz Show, Fox, and Friends USA Today, and the Huffington Post, among others. Her books have been translated into Chinese, Hebrew, Spanish, and her writing has additionally appeared in Newsweek, the Boston Globe, Vermont Magazine, and Vermont Life. She holds a BA and BFA from Cornell University and an MFA from the Rochester Institute of Technology. Please join me in welcoming Eve Schuab.
I have a mic. Can everyone hear me with this mic?
That's the camera.
I have to use two mics. I feel very fancy now. Thank you. Oh, and this is for my slides. All right. Well, thank you for that incredibly lovely introduction. I want to thank the Cary Library, which is beautiful, for having me. You're all very lucky to have this library in your community, and I bet you know that. I'd also like to thank Lex Zero Waste for contacting me and helping bring me in. I've met some wonderful ladies tonight who are so motivated and they are accomplishing things, and I find this inspiring. So I'm delighted to be in their company tonight. Thank you for the good work that you are doing. I also want to welcome the folks from Beyond Plastic Greater Boston. I know some of you are out there in the audience. Woohoo! And also I want to thank Center Goods for being part of this project tonight. Again, I'm jealous. I don't have a beautiful refill store like this in my town, and I think everybody should have one. So thank you so much for having me here tonight. Let's see if I can figure out the clicker. This is me. Hi. This is also me. And as you probably have guessed, I invented a job for myself. I perform experiments on my family so that I can write about it. And here they are. This is my wonderful family who are terribly patient with me. The year of no garbage in particular, though, I feel like it goes way back for me. I recall being a little kid and being absolutely fascinated with characters like Oscar the Grouch on Sesame Street. I mean, he was perfect. He did all the things little kids weren't supposed to do. He was rude, he was mean, and he kept things that were supposed to be thrown away. And I remember being a kid and looking into that big black plastic garbage bag under the kitchen sink into which absolutely everything went. You know, back then, we didn't talk about sorting at all. We didn't talk about recycling and we didn't talk about composting. Organic material, glass, paper, metal, everything went into this big black hole that lived in our kitchen. And I remember looking into that black hole and wondering what happened next. I knew it would get carted out to the garage and eventually get taken to the end of our driveway. And then what? Somebody comes and picks it up, and what happens next? I wonder what happens to all that material that's so different and varied. And I wonder if it could possibly be anything good. There's that big black hole. So fast forward a couple of decades. This is my t-shirt timeline. And we have learned a lot of things. We've come a long way. We've got all kinds of tools at our disposal now. I'm now a young-ish adult living in Vermont with my family of 4. And I see that we have so many wonderful tools at our disposal. I think of myself as a relatively good citizen of the planet. Relatively, you know, I shop locally, I go to the farmer's market, I bring my own bags to the store most of the time. And I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I also recycle and, you know, we've got all these tools and we're using them. And then I start to see online that there are these social media influencer type people who are talking about a term, zero waste. And this captures my imagination. And I think, wow, what would that be like? What would it be like to live without throwing anything away? What would that feel like? How hard would it really be to go from where we are now, using the tools that we use today, to that? And that's when I had my truly terrible idea. We were going to go for an entire year without throwing anything into the garbage. Of course, I had to convince my family first. So I got to work on that. But the idea was pretty simple. It was, I characterized it as Supersize Me meets the environmental movement. And I really like all of the folks who do what these so-called stunt projects, whether they're films or books. I'm very inspired by all of them because I see them as sort of explorers. You know, they're going to a place that most of us will never go. They're going to this far-off land. And in my case, the far-off land was called no garbage. And then they're going to come back and tell you what it was like. So after a fair amount of convincing, which I describe in the book, I end up promising my family that this is the third and final experiment in my trilogy. And if they agree to go along with no garbage, this will be the very last one. I promise, I swear, so help me God. And so on the very last day of December 2019, we made the very last use of the wheelie bin that carries the garbage out to the end of our driveway. And yes, that's right, that meant that 2020 was our year of no garbage. So the rules were very simple. I'm a very literal person when it comes to these sorts of things. So we could do pretty much anything. We could recycle, we could give things away, we could compost, we could repurpose, we could just beg people, strangers in the street, to take stuff, as long as we didn't end up putting anything in an actual garbage, which we knew would end up going to a landfill or an incinerator. And I was feeling pretty good as we approached January 1st, the first day of our project. And I was thinking, you know, we can recycle like all 7 kinds of plastic in our single stream recycling. You know, how much more plastic could there really be? Little did I know. And so I was feeling very confident, which brings me to chapter 1. This sucks and everyone hates me. Instantly, overnight, I was overwhelmed with how much I did not know about all the different materials that we brought into our home on a super regular basis, almost daily basis. A lot of it, most of it, was food packaging. And I realized that there were so many materials that I just didn't really know what it actually even was, which perplexed me. I had not anticipated this. There were materials like cartons that held liquid that felt like paper, but then how do they hold liquid if they're paper? Or coffee cups, again, same story. Or potato chip bags, or receipts. Were they just paper? Or they felt like it might be something more? Or the little tags they put on produce at the supermarket. There were so many things that I just was mystified by. What even is this? So I started what I called the Super Awesome Recycling Center in the corner of my kitchen. And here's the very beginnings of it. This was where everything went that I didn't know what was going to happen to it. Maybe I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where good it could go. But I had this theory that there's no such thing as garbage. Not really. That it's really just a matter of context or how we treat it. You know, for example, a plant, you know, a weed is just a plant that's growing somewhere we don't want it to grow. That's how I felt about trash. It's just a material that happens to be somewhere where nothing good is happening to it. So it was my job to get this material to the place where something good would happen. So very quickly, my Super Awesome Recycling Center stopped being cute and adorable and Instagram worthy and started becoming a little bigger and a little harder to manage. So I started doubling down. I got out the bigger containers, bigger baskets, and it kept cascading onto the floor in the kitchen. And then I'd double down again and I'd get even bigger containers. And I was sorting into what I figured were different similar types, you know, the plastic filmish type things and things that had mylar, like the chip bags, and putting like with like. So here we are trying to make sense of this horrific mess. This is my younger daughter, Ilsa, appropriately horrified. Here I am completely overwhelmed. This is the wall of Super Awesome Recycling Center. But in general, what did we do? How did we begin? Well, the first thing we did was we washed everything. If it came into the house, you had to wash it and dry it and sort it. And if you didn't know where it goes next, off to the corner of the kitchen. But of course, we did all the other things that you would think of first as well. We switched out our disposables for durables. So for example, we stopped using Kleenex and we started using hankies. We started shopping more locally, smaller, because I knew that if I went to the local store, the local deli, I'd have a much better chance of being able to get some of my food, my bread, my cheese in just paper, no plastic. I also started looking online because I didn't have a wonderful refill shop near me. For zero waste products. And I started trying a whole host of different things that came to me in the mail. Also wrapping presents, I used cloth, I used newsprint. So all the things that you would think of first. And then, of course, you know, we had taken that wheelie bin that used to go once a week to the end of our driveway, and we had wheeled it to the corner of our garage where it sat sad and lonely for the rest of the year. But our recycling wheelie bin was getting all the attention. And we were packing it full with absolutely everything, you know, whereas once upon a time, we might not have put every single thing that was legitimately able to be recycled according to our garbage service provider. But now we put everything, including the plastics number 1 through 7, which refers to the resin identification code inside the chasing arrows triangle, which most people are probably familiar with. I already had a compost. I live in Vermont in the country, so I was lucky that that's not very hard for me to do. But we doubled down and we started putting things in there that I had never thought to put in there before. Other organic material, like the hair from our hairbrushes, or pizza boxes, because they're cardboard, but they've got food on them. So most recycling folks don't want to see those. Also, if we had the occasional stray paper towel that happened by, because of course we're pet owners, and every once in a while you've got a mess that you really don't want to use a reusable towel for. So every once in a while we'd have a paper towel hanging around that could go into the compost as well. I also started posting online on message boards, and I found a whole bunch of different forums. One is called Free Cycle. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's a really good forum. The only rule there is that everything must be free. You can post there that you're looking for something or that you have something that you want to give away. Also, I found other local forums, and I started posting the weirdest stuff. I'd be like, who wants my, 3-month collection of plastic bottle caps? And somebody did. Who wants my collection of twisty ties or rubber bands or wine corks? Who wants to make a craft project out of my wine corks? I also had a very substantial collection of silica gel packets building up. I found somebody who wanted those for drying herbs. And then I got into the field of what I called extreme recycling, which is sort of above and beyond. Now, most people are probably aware of the plastic the plastic bag recycling container that many supermarkets have, and also a lot of Walmarts and Targets and so on. But what I didn't know is that this is not just meant for plastic bags. It also is perfectly acceptable to put in any kind of plastic film you can find. So that's going to include stuff like bread bags, Ziploc bags, bubble wrap, any kind of overwrap on a product, also dry cleaning bags. I was like, oh, this is a revelation. So I started doing that. Then I discovered the Carton Council, which is an industry organization. And for all my cartons, whether they were gable top or aseptic, whether they had to be refrigerated or were shelf stable, all I had to do was wash and dry and put them in a box, collect enough to fill the box, and then take it down to my local post office and mail that box, pay to mail it to one of 4 locations around the United States. And they promised me that something good would happen to all of those cartons. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And then I discovered TerraCycle, which is a company that is well known for trying to eliminate the idea of garbage. They shared my idea that this is all material that's valuable and has a good place to go, and I loved that. And so it's a pay-to-play recycling-based company, meaning that if you send them a big pile of money, they will send you a box. You can fill it up and send it back to them. The postage is included in the money you've already spent. And they promise you, again, something good will happen to this material. So I started doing that. So all of these materials, the wipes, facial wipes, cleaning wipes, coffee cups, potato chip bags, receipts, all these things that I was so confused by. What is this material? It's plastic. It's always plastic. You don't know what something is. The answer is it's always plastic, and that became our Year of No Garbage rule number 1. In fact, I started to find out there are an awful lot of things in the world that I had never quite stopped to think about what they were actually made of or might contain. And I was pretty astounded to start to realize that plastic was in a lot more places than I had ever thought to think about, thought to realize. And so not just receipts and dental floss and wipes, but cigarette filters, ooh, hot plastic that you can breathe through. Tampons, not just the wrapping, not just the applicator, but the tampon itself, the part that's going in your body. That's not fun. Tea bags, ooh. So hot plastic in my beverage. Leather that is vegan, fur that is faux fur. It's all plastic. I just never thought about it before, but of course it was. nail polish pavement, and so on. The list kept going on. Oh, I won't do that. No. But it was going to be okay, right? Because most plastic, all 7 kinds, is recyclable, right? I think even before we began our project, I was aware that a lot of people find recycling, and plastic recycling in particular, confusing. And even though I had made it my full-time job to figure out what was going on, it was still confusing. There were so many different organizations, so many symbols, so many different things going on. I found it still challenging. So I doubled down and I decided that I was going to be calling and emailing these companies for whom this was their packaging and get to the bottom of this. And so I had all of these back and forth exchanges. And it's now at this point, we're talking about the pandemic. So everybody's at home. So I'm getting them at home. Babies are crying in the background and they do not want to talk to me. And they didn't have any really good answers. They had misinformation. They had disinformation. They had, why do you want to know this? I'm pretty sure you're just supposed to throw it away. And I realized that I didn't have a good authoritative resource. I didn't have someone I could really trust. These companies didn't really care. They had a 1-800 number to make you think that they cared, but they couldn't answer my questions, or they wouldn't. So I was at a crossroads. Who's going to tell me the truth? And I was also starting to wonder, if this is true, that it's this big mystery, all these plastics that are not in the, going into the single stream, what's even happening to the stuff that really does go in the single stream? And what's happening with that recycling? So I had all these questions. I needed an authoritative resource. And fortunately for me, I happened upon this. I got an advertisement for a Zoom class that was being offered by Bennington College, featuring Professor Judith Enck, who is a former regional administrator for the EPA under the Obama administration. And she was teaching a class called Beyond Plastics 101. And I went, oh, the clouds parted, the angels were singing. I was like, this is exactly what I need. I need to find out the truth, and Judith is the one who is going to tell me. And she did. I got the truth, and it was so much worse than I ever could possibly have imagined. What's so bad about plastic? I mean, after all, plastics make it possible, and it's true. Plastic is a miracle material that we all use every day, and isn't that wonderful? There are so many things that plastic does that I'm not sure we would know how else to do it without it. When you ask people, what do you recycle? They say plastic more than anything else. 85% of people asked will say, I recycle plastic. But how much plastic actually gets recycled in any way at all? Only 5%. That means 95% of plastic is not being recycled. That's kind of shocking, especially when you consider that we've been trying to get better at this for the last 4 or 5 decades, since I was that little kid watching Oscar the Grouch on Sesame Street, and especially when you compare it to the recycling rates for things like paper and cardboard, steel cans, 68%, 70%, 50%, 5%? So what's wrong with plastic? Answer number 1, it's not getting recycled. And if traditional single-stream recycling for plastic is not working, then what about all those programs that I had, worked so hard to uncover and was paying really good money to ship across the country? Not the most environmentally friendly thing to do, I'll give you that. But I was desperate. And I was like, what about all my cartons? What about all that stuff I sent to TerraCycle, all that plastic packaging? I was so happy that they took it. The problem is, with all these extreme recycling programs, there is no accountability. There is no sheriff in town. There is no one making sure that any of these companies are actually doing what they say they're doing. So this is all greenwashing. This is all to make us feel better. that there's something good happening to this material, but there's no proof that that is actually happening. So then I started to notice that there were lawsuits coming about as a result of this. TerraCycle was being sued. Greenpeace, I know, was suing Walmart over the plastic film recycling. Lawsuits. And then there was a film expose that found bales of TerraCycle plastic packaging at a Bulgarian cement kiln. I was truly horrified. I mean, I had personally spent time washing and drying and sorting and putting into a bag, into the box and paying good money. I certainly did not do all that for it to be burned in Bulgaria to make cement. So if we're putting all our plastic in recycling and it's not getting recycled, where does it go? Well, it used to go to China. And as many of us know, in 2018, China implemented its national sword policy and said, no more. We don't want this stuff anymore. Here's where it's going now. As a result of the national sword policy by China, there's now a black market plastic waste trade that distributes this material to countries that do not have the infrastructure to prevent it being dumped all over their landscape. So you have Vietnam, Kenya, India, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, and many more. Unfortunately, this is where our well-intentioned recycling has gone. So I concluded, when I learned this, that plastic is a form of environmental racism. If you want to learn more about this, The Story of Plastic, the documentary film that came out in 2019, is a terrific place to start. They tell this story very well. It's very powerful. I highly recommend this film. It's not just a problem of the disposal of our plastic, actually. It's also a problem of the plastic production, which is in the form of extraction through fracking, also through the refining factories. These facilities are regularly cited in low-income communities and communities of color. So again, racism, plastic is racist. The most famous example of this, which you may have heard of, is Louisiana's Cancer Alley. So what's wrong with plastic? Well, it's not getting recycled.
Recycle those batteries.
I was on a roll. Is that better? Okay. So it's not getting recycled, and it fosters environmental racism. We also know, famously, that plastic is overwhelming our natural environment, in part because of the famous YouTube turtle with the plastic straw in his nose, but also many of you may have seen the pictures, the photographs of albatrosses that pick up pieces of plastic they find, and they think it's food, and they feed it to their babies. And the babies die, and the moms die too. Of course, these are just two examples among far too many. Plastics are being found by scientists everywhere in the natural world that they care to look for them, from the top of Mount Everest to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Ocean garbage patches. There's not just one ocean garbage patch, the Pacific Ocean garbage patch. There's one for every ocean we have. We also know that the garbage patches, which I call plastic garbage patches, because of course that's what they're composed of, plastic, now occupy 40% of the oceans on our planet. So what's wrong with plastic? To recap, it's not getting recycled, it fosters racism, it's overwhelming the natural environment, and it contributes to climate change. Every step of plastic production contributes to climate change. If plastic were a country, it would be the 5th largest producer of the emissions that cause climate change. So it's not getting recycled, it's racist, it's overwhelming the natural environment, and it drives climate change. But wait, there's more. plastics, I remember when I was a kid, we used to think that plastic, well, it'll break down and go back to the elements that created it eventually, right? Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years, but someday, right? Turns out that's not true. Plastics don't break down at all. They break up into microplastics. They get smaller and smaller until we can hardly see them, and then we are eating and breathing them all the time. As a result, scientists have also started looking inside the human body, and they are finding microplastics there everywhere they look. In our liver, in our brain, in our blood, in our lungs, in our poop, in breast milk, and in the placenta of newborn babies. So we might as well add microplastics to the food pyramid because we are all eating 5 grams of microplastics on average per week. 2 factors that accelerate the shedding of microplastics are heat and age. So I encourage you, first of all, don't put plastic with your food in the microwave because you're encouraging more microplastics to migrate into your food. Also, if you are like me and you're super proud of your very old Tupperware collection that you have cared for and used for a couple of decades, get rid of it. Because that too is breaking down faster and migrating into the food that it contains. There's a famous study called the Danish water bottle study that I found out about, where they took a water bottle, an athletic plastic water bottle, the kind you'd give your kid to take to soccer practice, and they filled it with room temperature tap water. They set it on the counter for 24 hours. And when they came back and tested that water, they found 400 plastic-related chemicals had migrated in that 24-hour period into that water. As a parent who's handing a water bottle to my kid going off to soccer practice, I find that horrifying. So the important thing to understand about plastic is it's made of 2 ingredients. It's made of fossil fuels and toxic chemicals. When I say toxic chemicals, I'm talking about some very bad actors. I'm talking about persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals, PFAS, the forever chemicals. We're talking about known endocrine disruptors, known carcinogens, known fertility inhibitors. This is very, very bad stuff. So remember, 5% of plastic is getting recycled. But plastic actually doesn't recycle the way other materials do. To recycle plastic in any way at all is costly, energy intensive, and toxic because of the toxic chemistry involved in making it. So when we try to recycle plastic, it breaks down in structural integrity. It's still plastic, but it doesn't do the things we need it to do anymore. It doesn't hold up the way it should. It doesn't perform. So instead, we actually aren't recycling plastic at all. We downcycle it. And when we downcycle it, we add new virgin plastic to it, a whole lot of new virgin plastic, as much as 70 or 80% of that supposedly recycled plastic product is not old plastic at all, it's new. The only resin identification code numbers for plastics that get recycled in any way are numbers 1 and 2. So perhaps you've heard of like taking milk jugs and turning them into picnic benches, for example. That's an example of downcycling. You've taken a product and made it into something much less complicated and added a boatload of new plastic, new virgin plastic, and some more toxic chemicals just for fun, to make it do what we need it to do. So why not just do that? We could just make a whole bunch of picnic benches, right? And other downcycled products. How about that? We could at least take care of the 1s and 2s. But remember, we've got all those toxic chemicals. And when you start taking not 7 different kinds of plastic, but what turns out to be tens of thousands of different kinds of plastic, all made with different proprietary formulations of all these different toxic chemicals, and mixing them together in a big vat to make your picnic bench or whatever, all of those chemicals start interacting in unusual, unforeseen ways. And so scientists start discovering chemicals that are being born in that process. And they are called non-intentionally added substances. A recent study, 2023, found that in recycled plastic, there was an unknown number of chemical compounds at unknown concentrations. I don't know about you, but I don't want that wrapping my food. They don't even know what's in it, and they don't even know how much of that unknown toxic something is there. And as a result, there was a study that came out in Canada and the United States that said that recycled plastic is not suitable for processing into food packaging because it's too dangerous. On top of that, when we recycle, or I would say downcycle plastics, we're also doing a lot of grinding and washing processes. And when we do that, we're now washing all kinds of microplastics, millions of pounds of microplastics into the watershed, just to be discarded into our water systems. One study found that one facility alone could be responsible for 3 million pounds of microplastics per year washing into the waterways. This is why I make the argument that there is no such thing as plastic recycling. When we talk about recycling, we usually talk about taking a material that we're done with and turning it into a new product of similar value and function. Well, with plastic, we know that that's not possible. We know that we can downcycle, but we also know why we shouldn't, because it's dangerous. It involves all those toxic chemicals and all the toxic chemicals that are formed by accident in the process, not to mention all those microplastics as well. So I actually don't recycle plastic at all anymore. This is actually an opinion piece that came out on Earth Day that I wrote for the Washington Post. So I was delighted to have a forum to talk about, to bring this to people's attention, that plastics recycling doesn't work, it's a myth, it doesn't exist, and it's hazardous. Microplastics are absolutely everywhere. And why are we eating 5 grams of plastic per week? Because it's in our proteins, 90% of our proteins, including plant-based proteins. It's in 93% of our bottled water. And Consumer Reports recently found plasticizing chemicals in 99% of the food that they tested. Fortunately, we are starting to hear about this in the media, including the cost in terms of healthcare. A recent study linked plastic chemicals to almost $250 billion in healthcare costs. Microplastics can travel to the brain. The most recent study, which some of you may have heard about, very recent, nanoplastics are now linked to heart attack, stroke, and premature death. So plastic is poisoning us. So it's not getting recycled, it's racist, it's overwhelming the natural environment, it drives climate change, and it's toxic and finding its way into all of our bodies. I hate to say it, but every single person sitting in this room tonight has microplastics in their body as we speak, and I bet none of you asked for that. Okay, that's a lot. I'm sorry to be the bearer of that news, but I'm a very optimistic person by nature, and I do not think all is lost. But we do have to stop and say, now what? Plastic is so everywhere. It's so entrenched in every aspect of our lives as to be almost invisible to us now. We need solutions, right? So recycling's out. Plastic recycling's out. What about using compostables? Well, unfortunately, most compostables are not compostable. The English language is letting me down here. It turns out that when you say something's compostable, it could mean one of many things. It could mean that it's home compostable. I can take it out to my compost pile in the backyard and it will break down and degrade and return to the elements, and I can spread it on my garden the next year. Or it could mean it's only industrially compostable, which means it has to go to a very particular kind of facility where it will be subject to very specific temperatures and pressures to make that material break down. That is much more common, and if you see something that is labeled compostable and it doesn't say home, then you can be pretty sure that it is only industrially compostable. Now, that material, if it never makes it to the industrial composting facility, of which there are not very many, it will instead go to the landfill, where it will not break down. Landfills do not encourage things to break down. They are anaerobic environments, which means that they are hermetically sealed. There's no oxygen. That material is just going to sit there just the same as a piece of plastic. Not break down, not do anything good. So what about silicone? This is another thing that gets talked about a lot, is silicone products, because silicone comes from sand, right? So that's natural. That's got to be good. Unfortunately, silicone has many of the same problems as plastic does. Now, plastic, remember, comes from fossil fuels. Well, that is a natural product too, right? That comes from the earth. So when we take a thing that's a natural product, whether it's sand or corn or fossil fuels, and we bring it into the lab and we subject it to things that would never happen to it in nature, pressures, temperatures, and so on, it then can turn into something that will never reverse itself. We've now done something very unnatural to it, and we get repaid for the favor by it doing its job too well. And so, similar to plastic, silicone also contains toxic chemical additives, and it will not break down or decompose. Whoops. Wait a minute. There we go. So, is there anything we can do? There's a lot we can do. Yes. First of all, whenever you do have a choice, avoid the plastic option. We're all walking through the world all day long, every day, making choices all the time. And sometimes it's very, very obvious, like here are the eggs in the plastic container and here are the eggs in the cardboard container. If you can, pick the cardboard container. Don't drink bottled water. Don't heat your plastics in the microwave or the dishwasher. I do have some plastic still in my kitchen. I went through and like a tornado, and I deplasticized my entire kitchen. But I do still have some food containers that are Pyrex on the bottom and they have plastic lids. So I wash those by hand. Reusables. Everywhere you go, ask if they have reusables. And this is something that Lex Zero Waste is doing so well. They're encouraging people to use reusables. Just ask. Coffee shops have become my pet peeve, right? Because especially since the pandemic, people are just not even asking you, are you having that for here? No, they just automatically are giving you that coffee cup that is lined in plastic chemicals. And I don't want to drink that. I don't need any more microplastics in my body. So I am always asking, hey, can I have a ceramic cup? Can I have a reusable cup? And even if they don't have that, so I don't get a coffee, even if they don't have that, you're putting in your vote in a very polite way to say, this is something I as a customer would like. Maybe I'm not the only one. Also, just one of the things that I found in our project was I was forced to slow down. I was forced to be more thoughtful about what I brought into my home and what I did with it when I was done with it. And there were so many times that I found myself heading over to put something in the trash, only to realize it didn't exist. And so I had to think of something else. And that was a really interesting exercise for me, and I try to still employ it. Like, where could this go? What person needs my collection of twisty ties? Also, I like to remind people that we're not just talking about food packaging, we're also talking about our clothing. 60% of clothing is synthetic, which is to say, plastic. We're probably all wearing plastic clothing in here tonight of some form or other. So I remind people to look carefully at your clothes. And I actually have decided to stop buying new clothes. When I buy clothes, I buy them at the consignment shop. I buy them at the, in vintage store. I buy them at the Salvation Army. As long as somebody else has had it first, there's plenty of clothes in the world. Pretty sure I can find something wonderful. And in fact, I find the most interesting clothes that way. So I want to impress upon you again that the plastic waste crisis is directly related to climate change because I don't think that gets talked about enough. But it's not just about the natural environment. It's not just about the turtles and the polar bears. I know for some people, even though that's important, it's never going to be enough to change behavior. So we also know that this isn't just about the natural environment and all of those lovely animals and climate change. It's also about the health of our own human body and the health of our children and the health of our grandchildren and whether or not we get to have grandchildren. Because remember, one of the features of the toxic chemistry involved in plastic is infertility. I like to reassure people that I am not here to tell you that the plastic waste crisis is your fault, because it's not. You didn't ask for all this plastic in the world. I don't see the plastic waste crisis as a problem of demand. What about the demand for plastic? I see it not as a problem of demand. I see it as a problem of supply. Big oil is very excited to triple the amount of plastic in the world. And remember, big oil is synonymous with big plastic. They are one and the same. They would like to triple the amount of plastic in the world by 2050 or 2060. And I don't know anyone personally who wants triple the amount of plastic in their world than they have today. So that is not what we're asking for, but it's what we're being given. Here's a chart showing global plastic production. And you can see that it's not that long ago that we didn't have that much plastic. In fact, we had almost none back in the 50s and 60s, right? We actually got along okay without it. But here's where big oil / big plastic wants us to go. Up, 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 up. I don't know if you can see this line here, but it's like exponential, right? Just goes straight up. So what that tells me is that personal responsibility is important. It is important, but it's not going to fix everything. It is not the whole picture. We need other things at work as well. So we need legislative change, and I would like to say that we need corporate change, but I've become a little cynical about that because corporations have been promising to get better on this issue of plastic for literally decades. And they haven't done it yet. 2/3 of corporate pledges to go green either fail or are dropped. So they say things to make us feel good, and then we all forget about it and it goes away, and there's nothing achieved. So that's greenwashing, and we don't need more of that. So instead, we need to turn to legislative change. Now, what does legislative change really mean? Well, you've probably already seen some of it. Plastic bag bans have been implemented, bottle return bills, styrofoam bans, plastic cutlery bans, and also limitations on distributing plastic straws. But also more on a larger scale, we've got the 2023 Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which is making its way through Congress. We also have at the UN level, perhaps you heard about this past week, they were in Ottawa, trying to hammer out the terms of the Global Plastics Treaty. So Global Plastics Treaty. I find that very exciting. But we have to be careful because the plastics industry is onto us. And so they are co-opting our terms like crazy. And they're saying, it's okay, we're going to fix the plastic waste crisis by using energy recovery. And waste to energy. Well, that sounds fabulous, terrific. Tell me more about that. Oh yes, it's burning plastic. When you hear someone talk about chemical recycling, which sounds like a lovely thing, it means burning plastic. Now, when we burn plastic, we're creating toxic ash and toxic gases. We are not creating a deterrent to create more of this toxic material in the world. We're just encouraging them, actually. We're saying it's fine, it doesn't matter, we'll just burn it all and create all of this toxic material to fill up our world with. Don't buy it. I like to recommend Beyond Plastics as a resource. Not only does Judith Egg teach a wonderful class, which you can take on Zoom through Bennington College. She teaches it every semester, fall and spring. But also she is the founder of Beyond Plastics, the 501c3. And they're doing wonderful work to forward some of this legislation. And if you ever have a question about anything to do with plastics, but in particular with regard to legislation, you can ask them. They have a staff of 12 folks, and they will get back to you and they will answer your questions. You can find out how to get involved. There are over 100 local groups and affiliates that are related to Beyond Plastic under the Beyond Plastics umbrella. So if you're looking for like-minded folks who you can work on these issues with in your community, reach out to Beyond Plastics. There are a bunch of other wonderful groups that I also recommend, and here are some of them, including Break Free from Plastic, Plastic Pollution Coalition, Greenpeace, Human Rights Watch, because of, again, the environmental racism. Rise St. James has to do with Cancer Valley and the petrochemical buildout that's going on down there, and the Descendants Project as well. So we've been told a lot of lies, a lot of untruth, and I think the remedy to that is to start telling the truth. I do believe there's a lot we can do, and I do not believe that we have to get rid of all the plastic in the world. I don't think that's necessary. I don't necessarily think it's possible. We need to keep, I like driving a car that has an airbag. I like being able to see the world through my plastic glasses. I like my phone. I mean, I like the fact that there are medical plastics that are saving lives all the time. These are not what we're talking about when we talk about the plastic waste crisis. When we talk about solving the plastic waste crisis, we're talking about the 40% of single-use disposable plastic that is produced every single year. 40% of the plastic produced every single year is single-use disposable plastic packaging that is used for a few moments before it is discarded forever. So this is me again. This is me illustrating before and after, before our year of no garbage. We absolutely, without fail, every single week, filled up our 96-gallon trash container with trash and took it to the corner of the driveway every single week. Today, we have a trash can again. We have just one in the house. And into it goes single-use plastic food packaging that we have not figured out a way to avoid yet. It's 9 gallons a week now. So we've gone from 96 gallons a week to 9 gallons of trash. That is great. I feel very good about that. And I want more. So I hope the upshot that you take away with you tonight is that plastic is not our friend. We cannot take it for granted. We have to look at it with a suspicious eye. We have to know what we're dealing with. We need to make less of it. We need to use less of it. And I firmly believe that, yes, there are people in the world, I know many of them will not, they'll say, I'm not in a position to change my life. I'm not in a position to buy different groceries. I'm not in a position to drive to a different store or spend the time that that would take or the extra income. That's okay, because I firmly believe that this is about truth-telling, that awareness is the starting point for all meaningful change. So if you learned anything at all tonight that you didn't already know, I hope that you will go tell someone about it tomorrow. And that is me. And I hope you will follow me on the social media of your choice. I have a tendency to make very silly videos about plastic. I hope you'll follow me, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, we're going to come over.
You said that most of the waste comes from single-use plastics. But earlier you said if you have any Tupperware, throw it away. And that's something that I've been using for years and years and years and years, and I have never thrown it away.
Yes, it's not a good solution. I agree with you. I was not happy, actually.
For question.
Oh, sorry. Is this microphone working?
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I didn't have it close enough. The question is, most of the waste you said comes from single-use plastic. And I have a lot of Tupperware and I feel very righteous about reusing and not throwing the plastic away. But yet you're telling me that all this expensive Tupperware that I bought, I should not be reusing and I should toss it.
Well, okay, so the question is so single-use plastic is what's being thrown away, 40% of the amount of plastic produced every year, and that is the problem, which is true. That is a huge problem. And I feel like that's the low-hanging fruit. I feel like that's where we need to start. And I'm not going to tell you, if you're not ready to part with your plastic Tupperware, I'm not going to tell you to. You can keep using it. What frightened me was when I learned that the older my plastic Tupperware was, the more likely it would be to shed microplastics and toxic chemicals into my food. So really, this was about self-preservation. I don't want to eat that. And so I started gradually switching more and more over to my Pyrex and glassware. And I started taking all the plastic utensils, the spoons, and so on, and leaving the wooden ones. You know, I had a mixture. Like most people, I have a lot of everything in my kitchen that I've accumulated over the years. And I'm not going to tell you to throw that plastic away. But I do worry about what that means for the food that gets contained in it. So that's just something for you to consider.
Hey, what about the plastics? Like when you take out something, when you take something out of the freezer to heat it up, it's usually in plastic or packaged in plastic. And I mean, you have to heat it in that plastic. And I mean,
Well, I mean, it depends, because there's a lot of different things you could be talking about coming out of the freezer, right?
like, say, at dinner,
Like in a tray.
yeah,
So what I do with that is I'll let it get warm enough, so maybe you could run a little warm water, and you pop it out and you put it on a regular ceramic plate or bowl. And then I'll put that in the microwave. That's my workaround for that.
what about plastics? Like the meatballs are in a plastic bag. And if you eat that, wouldn't that plastic shed too?
Yes. Yeah. It's not good. It's not good. Our food system is overflowing with plastic, and it's really bad. And we're only just now starting to see the scientific studies from doctors as to what that's actually doing inside our bodies. So I try to advise people to do everything you can to avoid that, especially with regards to temperature and age.
So I would like to call my waste management company that comes to the house and ask them, what are they doing, or what can, I guess, like, what are they doing? And how, I don't know the questions to ask. You know, like, what are they doing with aluminum, my aluminum foil? What are they doing with cartons? You know, like, I don't know.
Well, I think it's likely that good things are happening to most of the materials that you're putting in recycling, because most of those materials actually have financial value in the recycling process, which is why we have better recycling rates for all those other materials except for plastic. And unfortunately, the likely answer of what happens to the plastic after it gets to you is that they hand it off to someone else, and that person hands it off to someone else and someone else, until it's such a trail that can never be followed. And then here you are in Myanmar in some kid's playground, and it's been dumped through bribery and, you know, black market forces.
Because there was on a website of a local town that I looked at, it said, send all your plastics to us because we make money off of your plastic. And I thought, that does not sound right.
No, it doesn't sound right. You're right to be suspicious. Absolutely. I don't know of anybody who's making money off of plastics in that way. No.
So thank you for all this. So let's say I want to get rid of all my plastic, some of which is way back. Where do I throw it?
Well, unfortunately, the same place that I now send all of my plastic, including stuff that is supposedly recyclable, I send it to the landfill. It is not a good solution. I am not happy about that. It is the best bad place that we have for such toxic material.
We're running out of landfill.
And we're running out of landfill, and all landfills eventually fail.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do? Task this to our great-grandchildren? Make sure this landfill stays sealed. Yeah, no, it's already leaking into our waterways.
So thank you, Eve. That was incredible. I'm actually a friend of Eve's, and I am the leader of the Beyond Plastics Greater Boston Group, which is part of a coalition called Plastic Free Massachusetts. And we are working on passing legislation in the state to reduce the amount of single-use plastics that we produce. And Michelle Sicolo, who is the rep of many of you here in Lexington, has put forward some incredible bills, and we really hope that these get passed this legislative session. And we have some postcards if you want to write them in support of these bills out there, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about what's going on in the state. A lot of our waste is actually getting incinerated, which is very toxic, and most of those incinerators are located in environmental justice neighborhoods. So my name's Eileen Ryan. If you want to find me, I'll maybe be near Eve after the discussion. Thank you.
Woo-hoo. Yes.
We have time for one last question.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Since China has stopped taking, recyclable plastics and everything, what is happening to the plastics? Are they even, I mean, where are they sending them? What are they doing with them?
So that's what all those slides that show the plastic strewn across the landscapes of all these different countries around the world. These are countries, in some cases, they're impoverished. They don't have the infrastructure to prevent this. They don't have the infrastructure to clean it up. And so unfortunately what's happened, this is being done to appease us, right? Because we want it to be recyclable. We've been told it's recyclable. We're paying good money for people to come pick it up at our curb and take it away and do something good with it. And instead it's being handed off and handed off and handed off. And next thing you know, it's taken around the world, which by the way, also not environmentally friendly, right? It's been shipped across the oceans and dumped because that's the way the system is played out now. It's not right, it's not good, and we need to fix it.
Well, thank you so much, Eve. Thank you so much for coming down from Vermont and sharing your story with us. And you and your family for your courage to embark on a year of no garbage and for being such an inspiration to us all. Can we have another round of applause? And so now we're going to switch gears. Maggie Peart, our Sustainability and Resilience Officer with the town of Lexington, will share some of the things going on in town. And Erica Bouchard-Ravens, who is a Lexington resident and owner of Center Goods in Lexington Center, will share a wealth of information after Maggie.
How is that volume? Can you hear me?
Sort of.
Maybe can I hold it? Might be better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. And Eve, thank you for that both inspiring and discouraging, honestly, talk. You definitely made me rethink some of the things I want to try to do in my life. So thank you for that. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the town. I joined the town about 2 years ago, and a small part of that role is, not small, a significant part of that role is working with our Department of Public Works on waste reduction efforts. And I wish I could get up here and tell you that Lexington is exceptional and we are not part of that broader system that is continuing to add plastic and create plastics being sent across the world. Unfortunately, we have not found the secret to where to send our plastic for it to be reused. And so we're looking as a town of kind of what are the steps we can take? How can we create demand and send messages to the state level, federal level, businesses of kind of what is that demand that we want and how do we want to move away from plastics? So I also wish I could get up here and say that I knew kind of the answers of exactly where at the local level our plastic is going. And kind of as Eve was describing, that's a really hard thing to figure out of, where exactly, what happens when you put your plastic in a Lexington bin, and it's sent to our recycling processing facility, and then where does it go? And as he was saying, that's a long chain of command, and it's incredibly difficult to find out what's happening to our waste in Lexington. So the plastic piece is an incredibly hard nut to crack, and something that I look to the entire community to kind of how we can be part of that broader system. So I will pivot my talk a bit to talk more about what Lexington as a town is doing and can do on waste reduction in general. Lexington has increasingly brought kind of zero waste principles as a priority. And it's really for a few reasons. Climate is a big piece of that. Lexington has been a leader in climate in the state for a long time. And as a town, we create between 8,000 and 9,000 tons of trash every year. That's just trash that isn't being reused or recycled. That's what's sent to our incinerator. So that's sent to an incinerator that's creating pollution and avoidable carbon emissions. And also that overconsumption is just driving into renewable or non-renewable resources, finite natural resources. So the climate's a big piece of that. And then environmental justice. Our incinerator is located in North Andover, and the ash after that incineration process is sent to Shrewsbury. Both of those communities are far outside Lexington borders, and the toxic creation from that incineration process is not felt by Lexington residents. They're both of those areas are closer to environmental justice populations in the state. So we're kind of outsourcing that negative externality from our waste production. The last piece of kind of why we are interested in this as a town is financial. By the end of the decade, Mass DEP has said in their statewide plan that most of the incinerators and landfills in the state will be at capacity, and we will then have to ship our trash out of state. So that's going to really add to our waste hauling fees, and it's something we're already seeing every year in the budget. We're seeing higher and higher waste fees. So what is the town doing about this? One thing, big shout out to Lex Zero Waste. They kind of kickstarted the process in terms of my own awareness. I'm relatively new to the town, but created a zero waste resolution that's really bringing zero waste principles as an overarching goal to the community. The zero waste resolution also made the commitment to the town to develop a zero waste plan. So that was something that was started at the end of 2022 and created by 2023. And that plan aims to achieve a 90% diversion rate. So that's recycling and composting from our waste stream within 10 years of the plan. So we're looking at 2033 for that. It's an ambitious goal and will require a whole lot of work. But some of the categories identified in that plan were things like changes to our collection system. So how waste is picked up and kind of the pay structure, the frequency of waste collection, things like that. That was a big piece of it. Outreach and education. How can we make sure that residents know what can be recycled, what can be composted? Technical assistance and enforcement. How can we work with businesses to make sure they know recycling resources that are available to them? Enforce bans like the mattress ban. You can't put mattresses in the trash anymore. They need to be recycled. There's compost requirements. How can we enforce those sorts of bans as well? Other pieces of that plan, leading by example. The town wants to integrate these principles into our own operations. the potential to expand infrastructure at our Hartwell compost facility, or use in those sites. Looking at our deconstruction, construction, and demolition debris, that creates a whole lot of waste and very, very heavy waste. So how can we put in place local systems or regional systems to reuse construction material as well? And then product policies and programs, that touches more on plastic. So at this recent town meeting, Article 31 passed, which was banning the sale of single-use water bottles in town. So things like that. It's one town and a much broader system, but starting to create kind of the belief that that's possible and showing residents of Lexington that they don't need that water bottle. They can get in the habit of bringing a reusable bottle. And not just Lexington residents, visitors as well. So that starts to have an impact. And so that's kind of the plan, how it has been shaped. Some of that work is well underway. Kind of a key piece in that zero waste plan was creating town-wide composting. And so we've launched a compost pilot last summer for 2,000 residents, and tomorrow at 9 a.m. enrollment opens for the next 2,000. So if anyone in this room is a Lexington resident who is not getting free composting, check out the flyer on your way out of how to sign up. But that's a big piece, because if you can get, that'll be a third of the town who can have free composting. And if we see in our waste stream that 35% of waste is compostable, and most of that is food waste, which is very, very heavy. So that's bringing down the tonnage dramatically. And that not only is great for the climate, but it also brings down the costs for the town. So it will open up budget to then pursue other zero waste strategies.
Are those compostable containers, will they be actually composted by Blackbird?
Which compostable containers do you mean?
Like the vegetables, I mean, sometimes you get them from locally, but that are in a, it looks like cardboard, and it says it's compostable.
So yeah, it's the same thing. You need to check for the certifiable compostable.
Commercially, and in Blackbird is commercial.
Yes, they're a commercial company. So things like even that, the certified plastic can be composted through Black. And then just the last piece that I'll touch on of kind of an exciting project that's underway. This past, I guess for the school system, this past semester, we had a group of Tufts graduate students at the Department of Urban and Environmental Policy and Planning, looking at our waste collection system and looking for innovative ways to address and kind of make improvements to reduce our waste. So they were looking at 5 different strategies: expanding compost collection town-wide, moving to automated cart collection. So instead of trash haulers dumping manually the bins, the automated tipping bins. Rate structure or trash metering, so a kind of way to re-incentivize through small fees away from producing trash towards recycling and composting. The last 2 was every other week trash collection. So if you're getting compost every week, you're going to see your waste dramatically decline. You will not be filling up your giant bin to the same extent. I noticed that when I started composting. I make a whole lot less trash. A lot of it is plastic. And then the last one was reuse collection. So how can we expand collection for commonly and unrecyclable items to have better either pick up at the curb or drop off. And so Tufts did a study for the town that got 1,500 responses from Lexington residents, which is tremendous. We usually see a few hundred responses for surveys. So that was really great to get a representative sample from Lexington residents that shows kind of the direction we want to go and kind of support for various projects. So if you're interested in seeing the results of that survey, please come to the select board meeting on Monday. They'll be presenting the results of that. And so just to wrap up, I think there's a whole lot that a town and a municipality can do. but they can't do everything, unfortunately. We are just kind of one piece of the system, and there's consumer choices. There is the entire fossil fuel industry to bring down. I am optimistic with kind of the group that's in Lexington, and the things far beyond Lexington that are going on and educating people with. So I would echo Eve's kind of closing thought of talk to 3 people about this tomorrow, and kind of just keep spreading that awareness, keep spreading awareness of local options in Lexington, but also kind of the broader systems. So I'll end with that and pass it off to Eric.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. Sorry it's a bit late. Thank you for hosting. Thank you, Eve, for coming to Lexington. What an important book. I hope everyone reads it. So much information, so much to get bummed out about, but, you know, really inspiring, and so much to do, right? Because I agree, the way to tackle a big problem is just to start, right? Start somewhere. I think the easiest thing to start with is the thing you can change, which is your own behavior. I'll just quickly tell you how I got here, which is 6 years ago, the EPA released the data that said at that time only 8.7% of plastic was getting recycled. Now it's only 5%, but at the time, this was news to me, and I looked at that data and it felt like an emperor's new clothes situation, because this is clearly a failing model, but none of the messaging was changing. It was still, you know, keep recycling, fill your bin, which is what I was doing. It didn't make any sense. It felt pointless, right? So I started thinking about, you know, if plastic waste is coming from a tap, it's obviously a better strategy to turn down that tap than try to clean up the mess. So I started looking for alternatives to plastic to bring it to my home. I had to order everything online because I couldn't find anything nearby. But what I found was a lot of really terrific independent companies, ethical, sustainable companies making non-toxic products for all the right reasons. And I started to feel like, you know, business can be a force for good. I hadn't really thought of that before. So I also learned that everything I had been using was full of really scary chemicals that was linked to all kinds of illnesses. So I was very happy to find these companies. So I ordered a lot of things. I had a lot of packages arriving at my home, and I thought, well, now this is not very eco-friendly. Plus, I wanted to see these new things in person that I had never heard of, but I couldn't find them locally. I kept hoping that someone would open a store in Lexington that carried all these great things that I could go look at. I eventually decided I would be that person, so I did open Center Goods. And you will see, you know, you probably noticed over the last few years, a lot of stores like mine have opened all over the US. We are about a decade behind many other countries, but nevertheless, these stores are full of great ideas. If you've ever looked at these products, you know, alternatives to plastic, but also different kind of packaging, right? Compostable packaging, package-free items. It's liberating. It really is. All kinds of replacements for single-use items. So, you know, all the things we're talking about, there's a lot of options that you could look for if you're interested. We also carry bulk refills, so you can bring any container from home and refill it over and over and over with shampoo and hand soap and dish soap, etc. And as far as plastic goes, I mean, not much to add, right? It's, you know, you hit the big ones. Plastic is poisoning us. Plastic and big oil inextricably linked. Recycling has always been a myth.
They've lied to us for decades. I mean, those are the big ones. So I guess I'm interested in just adding a little to one of the aspects that I think is really important, which is your responsibility as a consumer. Because when you buy something, your purchase directly supports that company, right? So I think it's important to know, who is that company? What are they doing? How are they making things? Are they harming the environment? Are they mistreating people? Your purchase directly supports that. And as we talked about, since the production of plastic disproportionately harms low-income communities and communities of color, when we buy plastic products from plastic companies, we are directly involved in that harm. I think it's important to remember that and think about that, because I sometimes, quite a lot, I hear people say, "What's really cool, eco-friendly product I could try? I'll just buy the cheapest one I see on Amazon. It's easier that way." I get it, but I encourage you to pull back a little bit and think more about the big picture of that purchase. Who's making it? How are they making it? What's that website? What's that store that you're buying it from? I think it matters. I know it takes effort. I know it can be less convenient, but I think it's really important we remember that convenience comes at a cost to the environment and to people. I think we all know usually that really cheap item where you say, "Wow, that's a bargain." Someone didn't get paid adequately for that. It wasn't the CEO, right? So it probably also didn't have someone behind it thinking about the environmental impact of making that product. And that's where we come in, right? So I understand having everything shipped to your house. It's convenient, but obviously there's a lot of packaging, a lot of emissions. We're not going to be perfect. Still going to buy things from those not so great companies. But again, it's awareness. The more you think about it, you'll make some changes in your buying habits. And if we're all doing that, we're going to elevate those sustainable companies. So I think it's really worth doing. I often think, have we reshaped the market? If we all put our minds to it, if we stop buying those poisonous, toxic things and we only buy from sustainable companies, can we shift that balance of power? I think it's worth trying. I really do. I'm absolutely furious at the corporations for creating these mountains of plastic trash and putting toxic chemicals in all of these products, and then manipulating us to make us think it was our fault. Really furious about that. They make billions of dollars and pay their CEOs millions of dollars. So it's naive to think that they don't have the means to change the way they do things. They are choosing not to. It's infuriating. So, we're not going to change that, but if we can shift that balance of power, I think it's worth doing. I think we can just start, and we can start talking more about the dangers of plastic instead of it just being, something messy on the ground. It's dangerous. And there really are alternatives. So you don't have to keep buying those shampoo bottles and laundry jugs and synthetic fabrics. And maybe just start with one thing. That's always the easiest. Doesn't really have to cost you anything. You can put your food in your old jars and use your old cloth towels. Give it a try. It's liberating, and it feels good to not fill up your recycling bin. It really does. I think it matters the same way that millions of people throwing away plastic bottles adds up. I think if we start removing those millions of bottles, we'll start to see a change. It's a good place to start. Just in our own community at Center Goods, last year, we diverted over 20,000 plastic items from the waste stream. And that was really just a handful of us that we tried. So, imagine if we all really tried, and imagine if every community really tried. I think we can do it. It's pretty easy, actually, to get the plastic and the petrochemicals out of your kitchen, out of your bathroom. There really are a lot of products that you can use. I think that, I know that using shampoo bars and bamboo toothbrushes isn't the solution. I know that awareness is what's going to help us elect politicians who really do put environmental issues at the top of their agenda. And that the awareness is going to help us create that political will to push them from the bottom up and demand that they legislate to save the environment. And it will also give them the support that they need to push back when big oil lobbies and puts pressure on them. So that's on us. We need to help push that forward. So, I do try to think about things that I buy in terms of first, whether I really need it or not, and then whether it's environmentally friendly and ethically produced, meaning were people treated fairly. And, does it cost more? Yeah, it probably does. And I really understand that that's a privileged option. If you can't afford it, no shame in that, and you can do other things to push this forward. But if you can afford it, I think this is a real opportunity to expand the sustainable goods market. Similarly, the organic foods market. If you remember, that started off very high prices, not a lot of options, but as privileged, primarily white people really expanded that market, places like Whole Foods exploded and prices came down and options became more available. So I think this is our opportunity to help expand this market. We just have to care. That's it, right? It takes all of us working together. One of the best things about running an eco-friendly store is that I meet a lot of caring people every day, both customers and suppliers. So I know we can do it. But I think we just have to start and we have to keep supporting each other as we keep moving forward. Thanks so much.
So that concludes our program this evening. So much information, so much to think about. I just want to thank Eve and Maggie and Erica and Lex Zero Waste once again for bringing this program to the community. Let's give them a round of applause. So thank you so much. Eve will be here to sign books at the back of the room. And thank you all for joining us and have a good evening.